Have you been funded and established by by the CIA or any three-letter agencies?
I think it'll be out by the end of this month.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes.
There's some early stage alpha. That's
By the way, I
exciting.
think that's the first time it's been mentioned. So congrats to Coin Bureau for.
So, I mean, could you share any moments where your analysts were absolutely floored by what they discovered? Like, I picture them screaming like, "Come quick, you're not going to believe this, what we found." Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview here on Coin Bureau. And today I have got Miguel Morel. He is the CEO of Arkham Intelligence, which is, of course, the preeminent blockchain analytics firm. And he's a returning guest on the Coin Bureau. So, Miguel, welcome back. And I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
No worries, man. So we've got a lot to talk about, and we don't have that much time. And I want to take a deep dive, obviously, into the alpha of blockchain tracking. But I think it's always good to start at the basics. So quite quickly, I just want to, obviously, Arkham is a lot of things, and I'm sure everyone in crypto has come across it in some form, be it on a news article, be it on Twitter. But very briefly, can you explain for our viewers what Arkham is and what your broader goals are?
Absolutely. So Arkham as a whole is essentially a way for people to try to understand more about who the market players within crypto are. Whenever there's major activity in the cryptocurrency space, everyone's always wondering what causes it. And the reality that there's always some person, some institution that is the one buying and selling a particular kind of asset, and that is what causes these price fluctuations. And so with Arkham, what we've intended to do is to build a platform where anybody can go on and search for who the major players within the space are and what it is that they're doing within the market in a way that could, produce market moving activity, for example.
Okay, great. So obviously you've got the platform that allows people to track addresses and everything, and it utilizes AI, and there's many components to it. And obviously it's focused on blockchain, which is crypto component. But last year, you've also introduced the exchange, the intelligence exchange, right, where you launched a token and all this kind of stuff. And I think just to lay into context, obviously there was a little bit of FUD around that in terms of people like this concept of docs to earn, snitch as a service stuff. And obviously you guys, I've watched subsequent interviews and you addressed it very well. So I think, do you feel that this has now subsided, this potential FUD that was created around the de-anonymization of addresses and the pain in terms of incentivizing people to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think anyone who has followed Arkham over the past year would know that we've been completely vindicated on, essentially everything that people claimed our product was going to be. There were many people who were kind of sort of very upset that they believe that our platform would essentially go around and releasing information about everyday sort of people, and that this is going to be plastered all over the front of our platform and protocol or whatever. And then what it actually turned into was a way for people to track down those committing scams, a way for people to look at proof of reserves within large exchanges and services, ways for people to find information about what governments are up to with Bitcoin. And there really wasn't any, to be honest, of this sort of malicious address information seeking. It doesn't exist. I haven't even seen requests for it. And in the very beginning, I think many people, especially those who are more cynical, felt as if what we had created would cause this sort of mass de-anonymization of, a bunch of sort of, normal traders and stuff in the space. That did not happen. But in fact, I think our vision was realized of wanting everybody to know, at least the major sort of players and bad actors, and bringing more transparency to that side of the space.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, but I'm curious then, just to circle back to this in terms of like the question of de-anonymizing, whales certainly potentially also want anonymity to some degree. And obviously, reading your white paper, one of the quotes is de-anonymization is destiny. And I'm just curious because I know you're an early Bitcoiner as well. And obviously there's the point around the whales, and there's obviously everyone who's doing scams and running scams should be de-anonymized, right? And this blockchain intelligence stuff is important. But how do you balance and thread the needle between like the idea of people who got involved in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, they wanted the anonymity component, but now also we want to de-anonymize the entire blockchain for people?
I think that, as a whole, our vision, or at least prediction that de-anonymization is destiny, is more of a political statement than a literal one. I think in the long run, in order for cryptocurrency to reach the sort of level of adoption that everyone is expecting, because for those of us who believe that Bitcoin will be $1 million or whatever, those of us with moon targets for this, I don't believe that we can attain that kind of scale and that kind of market cap as an industry in pseudonymous form. I think that as the industry continues to grow and get bigger, the dollars are going to have to come from somewhere. And when people sell, the dollars are going to have to go somewhere. And those are all coming from the traditional financial world. More dollars are moving from the traditional financial world into crypto. And as that happens, and as more and more of this money enters the space, it will not be in pseudonymous form, right? It won't be from like mining. It won't be from people doing anonymous $1 billion OTC deals or something like this. KYC and sort of compliance with anti-secrecy laws and bank secrecy laws and anti-money laundering and things like this exist in every kind of financial industry, including crypto. It's just that within crypto and blockchain, it hasn't been brought to the same scale as exists in, for example, equities. And so my view is that de-anonymization for public blockchains is destiny, because in order for public blockchains to reach that 10, 20 trillion dollar market cap as a whole, there will need to be significantly more, kind of compliance from the government's perspective, or else they won't allow it to reach that scale. And so that's why I have that perspective.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think it's more broadly like this institutionalization of crypto. So some people, the cypherpunks would have an issue with it in the sense that, Bitcoin was created to be outside of the traditional financial system. And now it's been increasingly becoming part of the traditional financial system. But, that's good because obviously it means adoption, but you have to have some trade-offs. And one of those trade-offs is transparency with what's going on, which you guys help to do quite well. So moving away from the philosophical point we're now and more back to Arkham. I mean, obviously, guys, it's amazing how you manage to do some of the tracking and some of the things you're able to pick up on, and as quickly as you do. So can you give me a quick idea of the process? How are these whales verified and identified and picked up?
So with Arkham, all of the information that we use is publicly available. The overwhelming amount is found on blockchains themselves. So a big component of our business is actually just taking information from the Bitcoin blockchain, from the Ethereum blockchain, Tron, et cetera, and actually analyzing that information from a machine learning perspective in order to find clusters of addresses that likely belong to the same entity, that being like an individual or an institution such as a government or a hedge fund. Once we have that, we use whatever sort of kind of metadata we have found or is available from, for example, court filings, things people have posted publicly on their websites, et cetera, in order to then match the portfolio of that entity to the cluster of wallets that we have found. And based on the similarities in activity, in timestamps, in amounts, in coins, et cetera, we essentially make predictions about what entities, what cluster of wallets are likely to belong to which entities. That's sort of the high level process for how it works.
So is it probabilistic in the sense that
it is?
So you can never say so you can like, when it comes to verifying, and that's bring this back, we'll talk about the ETF wallets as well, but it's like, the certainty with which you can say a wallet is X belongs to X entity. so you can't say it's 100% because it's, with this don't trust verify kind of thing. So it's kind of like using a probabilistic model to, present as fact.
Absolutely.
This is yeah.
Absolutely. Arkham is at the end of the day, is a tool in a toolbox, which you should be using as part of a more, let's say, holistic analytical approach, right? I think anything in science as a whole, and this is typically my response to people who maybe are like skeptical of our methodology or skeptical of the fact that we say we can't, prove things 100%. It's that the overwhelming majority of the time in science and in experimentation, it is probabilistic. It is not a 100%, silver bullet, right? So if I'm running a pharmaceutical company and I create a cure or a solution for some kind of problem, in this case, the problem is people, not having transparency within the crypto space. Like, yes, there's auditability in the sense that anybody could look at a block explorer, but the reality is that information isn't as useful as what you see on Arkham. It's a lot more useful to actually see the name of an entity than it is to see the address. And so for me, it's kind of like I'm finding the cure to a particular problem, and we're saying that in, let's say, 95% of cases, the information is likely to be correct. And yes, there is some margin of error in the same way that, there's margin of error for any kind of cure. But we take a very scientific approach to it in the sense that, it should be the case that it is probabilistic, and you should be very skeptical of anyone who says, we know this with 100% certainty for just about anything that, is not owned by them or being created by them.
Yeah, makes sense. You currently, just in terms of what blockchains you track, is this Bitcoin, Ethereum, and
Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tron, Base, Arbitrum, Optimism. Yeah, we have a lot of them.
Okay. Is there a minimum requirement in terms of what blockchains? Because obviously you need the data, a lot of data, not just from the component of the transactional data, but wallet addresses, port filings for the machine learning component, right? So is there a minimum requirement in terms of?
No, I would say there's no minimum, but we try to add the blockchains that have the most activity. So we're constantly looking for, okay, which blockchains are getting a lot more hype, which blockchains are actually, being used the most, which are the ones with all the interesting, activity. And once we have that in place, then we can begin, building what we need to build in order to offer support for it. But otherwise, we tend to sit and wait to verify that, we've got actually, good, healthy activity in an ecosystem before we attempt to offer support.
Okay. And have you got any little insight into which other kind of blockchains you guys are at least looking at onboarding, or, is that still?
The next one will be Solana.
That's a big one.
Which does not yes, that's going to be a big one. Does not currently have a really amazing Explorer. We get many complaints about people who want to be able to use Solana and they're not able to. So I am very, very excited to add it for sure.
Yeah, that would be is there any sort of, I know you don't want to commit to any hard timelines, but just a rough idea, because I'm sure the crypto industry would love that.
I think it'll be out by the end of this month.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes.
There's some early stage alpha. That's
by the way, I think that's the first time it's been mentioned. So congrats to Coin Bureau for the information and the alpha.
You got to ask the right questions, man.
Yes.
That's what everyone's running for, because obviously that's where a lot of meme coin degeneracy is taking place. And I'm sure that, there's lots of people who would like a bit more transparency on that side, which is good.
And a bunch of people who wouldn't. Which makes it rather controversial.
You guys are going to become fudded again. You're going to get fudded by the entire Solana meme coin community now, but it is what it is. So I want to just come back to some, cases, like case studies in terms of what you've currently been tracking. And it's fascinating more on the institutional side in terms of the ETF data. And, I noticed this because I think about 2 weeks ago, I chatted to your team there and I was like, you guys, we're doing some research on there was the questions around BlackRock and Coinbase settlement, right? In terms of, is Coinbase holding all that FUD created on-chain addresses and things like that? And you guys are one of the few that were able to actually, have the BlackRock identified BlackRock's, but ETF addresses. And I watched one of your presentations in Istanbul. I mean, do you want to explain exactly the significance of why, it's important for this, in this case, where you've got a ETF that has fully transparent settlement mechanisms, and what this means for the financial world?
Absolutely. So I think as a whole, the traditional financial industry is behind in the sense that people are constantly making filings. They're constantly needing to have some centralized process by which people can, by which corporations can make filings about their holdings and can kind of give people insight into what's actually going on inside of the company. But then that ends up requiring third-party auditing and consulting firms, let's say such as Deloitte, in order to actually verify that the information is true prior to it being filed with the regulator and then exposed to the public. And the issue with this is multifaceted. One, it's an incredibly centralized process. Two, it requires the trust of the institutions involved who are actually verifying the information. And then three, the timelines for it are very long because auditing people takes a long time, filing things with the government takes a long time, and uploading those things to the internet then also adds a bit of a delay. So the overwhelming majority of the time, this ends up happening quarterly, or in the case of something like an ETF, potentially even daily. With Arkham, when you have all of that information about which is actually being created in terms of the addresses, which addresses are actually being created in order to hold the Bitcoin for a particular ETF, you can actually see the settlement happening in real time. You don't have to wait for the end of day release or report or whatever before being able to have the information about how the ETF is performing on a given day. And so that's actually one of the most interesting things about Arkham is that we're one of the only places, if not the only place right now. I don't look at what other people have done, but historically, I know we've been the first on several of these identifications, where in real time you're actually able to see the information of what's going on with an ETF and what are the current balances and what are the withdrawals and what are the deposits. And that gives you an indication of how the market is doing in real time rather than needing to wait to do the research later.
Yeah. I think it's also because obviously everyone's tracking and looking at, the ETF filings in terms of how much inflow or outflow came the day before, right? And
Yes.
with this, basically, it's like they can get that information real time. So have you seen funds of any description or that you know of that utilize your ETF, your tracking data in terms of the ETF settlement?
There are many. Yeah, there are hundreds of hedge funds who use Arkham at least on a monthly basis in order to get information. Perhaps not specifically about ETFs, but certainly a combination of ETFs, looking at what other hedge funds are doing, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah. And is it only, I know IBIT, BlackRock, do you have what other hedge fund, ETF funds have you managed to identify addresses, managed to locate and identify?
I think Fidelity, Van Eck, those are two other big ones. I don't know them all off the top of my head. I think there are like 12 or something, and we've managed to get just about all of them.
Okay, cool. And have you, I guess it's like the settlement that's the public filings that come out, all these normal tracking websites, Farsight Investors, all these other ones. Have you tried to match up, and is it generally fully accurate? And then that you guys know, okay, this is definitely the address because we see the settlement on chain, and then afterwards when the actual filings come out.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So that using essentially back testing on this information, we are able to confirm that it is actually it's actually the case, right? Because we get to see from the very beginning of the history of the ETF what they're publicly filing in terms of how much Bitcoin has come in and out of the particular cluster of wallets that BlackRock owns. And then after we make the publication about which addresses we believe belong to BlackRock, we can then continuously update our model of those addresses and the probability that we are correct, given that every single day it should be that our cluster of addresses matches the same balance that BlackRock reports. And so we can, from this third party perspective, understand more about what's actually happening and whether or not we're
Yeah.
correct, right? So it's a way of independently, verifying what
And
we've said.
training the machine, obviously, training the machine learning algorithms with the accuracy
Correct.
that you come. Um,
Correct.
okay, so obviously, ETFs are the most preeminent example here, but you obviously talked also about Bitcoin miners. And I found this very interesting because it's one of those ways in which you can try and get alpha on what a Bitcoin miner's earnings could be like based on
Right.
what's reported in terms of tracking on Arkham, able to track in terms of miner wallets. You maybe just explain that a
Right.
bit more?
Yes, absolutely. So the basic sort of concept and theory there is that there are plenty of publicly traded companies within the cryptocurrency space. Maybe they're not all exchanges like Coinbase, but there are publicly traded companies such as mining firms who are constantly reporting their earnings on this quarterly basis. And analysts are trying to make predictions about how much money they have made in order to see if they will beat or fail at earnings. And so I think as a whole, what we have managed to do is if you actually do the identification of the wallets that are actually owned by these miners, you can see the amount of the Bitcoin that is being essentially generated by them. And therefore, you have the ability to look at all of the information of the coins that they are receiving, the price at which they are receiving it, and how it is that they're selling it, right? You can see if they're depositing it onto exchanges, if they're sending it to OTC firms, et cetera. You see the amount of Bitcoin, and then at the end of the day, you can calculate the amount of money that is actually being created from this value that they're sending to these OTC desks and to these exchanges. And then from there, you're able to then calculate, theoretically, you're able to then calculate the amount of revenue that they're making against what their costs are. And then you have an estimate of profitability and therefore what their share price should theoretically be worth, right? And so this is a much kind of more direct way of being able to understand, the performance of a mining company without necessarily needing to wait for them to report their earnings or do some other kind of weird observations or data gathering to try to understand how much money they make, because at the end of the day they make money from mining Bitcoin, and that information is all publicly available. So theoretically, it should be perfectly efficient.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because that's like it's one of the few industries, I think probably the only industry where you can use like this information and glean like earnings from it. And
Exactly.
so I'm curious then, be moving beyond these two the biggest examples you guys have gone and talked about. If it was ever a particular example where it really caught your eye the most, I mean, could you share any moments where your analysts were absolutely floored by what they discovered? Like, just I picture them screaming like, "Come quick! You're not going to believe this! What we found."
Hmm. That's an interesting question. I mean, we always have different kinds of findings. Very rare for us to really be surprised at any particular thing. I think some of the most interesting stuff has been government related. As
Mm,
a whole, I think that has also been some of the stuff that has gone the most viral for Arkham, right? Finding the wallets of the German government, for
mm,
example, or of the Kingdom of Bhutan. Those are things where those pieces of information prior to Arkham did not exist publicly. Nobody knew who owned those wallets, or if these governments had this money, or what they were going to do with it. And
mm.
this is very important kinds of information for people, which is why this news ends up going so viral. So as a whole, I think the most kind of shocking discoveries we've made have probably been the ones that are government related, because they're the most sort of interesting, and also the ones where there has been the least publicly available information about them. We also found the Tesla and SpaceX Bitcoin holdings. That was pretty cool, right? Because
Mm.
beforehand, you would need to wait for the announcements from SpaceX or from Tesla, mostly Tesla, because that's the one that's actually public. You would need to wait for them to actually tell you that they are buying or selling their Bitcoin in their quarterly statements, but now you don't have to do that. You can just look at Arkham.
Yeah. And the Bhutan case, that was also, I mean, at that stage, you guys, if I recall, you identified they were mining and they were using mining pools and stuff. And how did you conclusively, like, I mean, obviously we say it was all probabilistic, but I mean, they disclosed it. So were there any particular points of information, any ones that you can point to us, like, yeah, this conclusively proved this was linked to Bhutan, or is it more just?
There was a lot of publicly available information about the mining projects that were going on in Bhutan, and their size and their scale and so forth. The dates which they went operational. These are kinds of very interesting pieces of information. There was a lot of in-depth investigative journalism being done by Forbes as well. They did a really great job bringing together all these different pieces of the puzzle. And so using all of those kind of crumbs, let's say, we were able to piece together a story of what was actually going on in Bhutan with their Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. All through thanks to the blockchain. So I just want to quickly, like, obviously, Arkham has got like a massive range of tools, but I'm curious in terms of where do you see room for improvement in your current offering, and is there anything in particular you're trying to take to the next level when it comes to your product offering, your suites, your tools, and features and functionality?
That's an interesting question. Absolutely, I want to add Solana. That is one kind of major gap in terms of activity in the cryptocurrency space that we do not currently analyze. Additionally, I think it could be really interesting to add way more, market-related tools. So branching beyond, on-chain information is obviously our bread and butter and will always be our kind of core focus. But given that our audience is made up of investors and of traders, I want to add more market-related information that could be off-chain in order to help people use Arkham as kind of like a full tool suite rather than needing to use other sorts of products in order to kind of supplement the information that they find on Arkham about what's going on chain. So maybe sort of verticalizing more of those types of analytics from not just on-chain info, but also the off-chain information, I think could be very interesting.
Okay, got it. So I want to quickly finish off with one of the most pressing questions as well. Now, this is obviously kind of going back to the fact I've seen some questions online, and have you been funded and established by by the CIA or any three-letter agencies?
No, absolutely not. Unequivocally, no. Completely private. Yeah, we don't have any relationship with any of those kinds of agencies. So just a bunch of crypto guys wanting to build really great analytics tools for the space. Though I could see, because we've built such amazing technology, why people would believe that it's government backed. But the hilarious thing is that my personal opinion of this is that the fact we've built such amazing technology is actually evidence that it was not built by the government, because the government could never build something as good as Arkham. Is basically my take.
To be fair, you guys have identified lots of government wallets, so you've doxed the governments, and
yes,
many people think that Bitcoin was a lab. Some people think Bitcoin was a lab leak from an intelligence agency itself. So, at the end of the day, if it's transparency for the space and we help identify the bad actors, and the tools help people to spot addresses and make money in the space as well, it's a benefit for all.
Absolutely.
So Miguel, this has been it's been unfortunately a short interview because we have to run, but it's been great and very insightful so far, and I'd love to have you on again. But thanks for coming on to the Coin Bureau, and hopefully,
absolutely.
Where can our fans follow you? Obviously on Twitter. Is there anything else, any other links and stuff you want to highlight here?
Well, I would definitely recommend people actually go onto the Arkham platform itself and look at all the wonderful analytics information that exists on there. You can sign up for our platform, and then we'll add you to our marketing chain so that you receive new updates about the product. And then otherwise, Twitter is the best place to look at our new updates and exciting information.
Great. Yeah. So guys, we'll link to below, and we'll definitely get Miguel back on when they release their Solana functionality, and he can tell us where all the meme coin whales are sitting.
Absolutely.
Come on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers.